All right, you are good to go.
All right. I'll call the audit committee for April 15th to order. I hope having an audit committee on tax day is not an evil omen for anyone, but I'll keep my fingers crossed for sure. First order on the agenda is roll call. We have Jim Cardello, Anne Marie Baker, and Alderwoman Rondell Pendle Charles, as well as myself. So we have a quorum. Others may join us as time allows. First order of business is approval of the agenda, which everyone should have. It's a light agenda, which is fortunate because we have to run right from here to Finance Committee meeting. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as sent out?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. First order on the agenda is approval of minutes. We have, thanks to Kim, once again, a nice set of minutes, and they're a little bit more than action minutes, so it captured some of the things that we discussed, and I'm appreciative of that. So are there any amendments to the agenda, the minutes, or if not, a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes as submitted is signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The minutes are approved. Under old business, I thought we'd done this, but since it's on the agenda and Kim is on top of our business, we need to elect the officers. There's only one officer of the audit committee I know, and that's the chair. I had earlier nominated Madeline, but she deferred. She said she didn't want to take that job on. So do we have any nominations for the chair of the audit committee?
I nominate Alderman Ross Arnett.
That is seconded.
All right. Any others? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Now, next item is a delicious item today after months of embarrassment. We have audit committee vacancies, and we have Anthony Nobillo. Did I say it right, Anthony?
Nobilio. We're getting there.
Nobilio. We're getting
Yes.
there. I'm a slow learner.
That's fine.
Who is joining the meeting today. Jim sent me Anthony's CV, which I can send to committee members if you would like to review it, but I can tell you that it's quite extensive and very impressive. And Anthony has agreed to attend today's meeting and can ask us questions and observe us. And the next step would be for me to submit to the, I guess it would be to the city clerk to add Anthony's name to the agenda for a vote by the city council. So we select our own members, the council approves, and that's pretty straightforward process. So Anthony, would you like to say a few words?
Sure. So first of all, it's an honor to be here, and very excited about the potential opportunity here to move forward with the audit committee. I'm a lifelong resident of Maryland, live a few miles north of Annapolis in Severna Park, lived there for most of my life. Started my career in public accounting with Ernst & Young, one of the big four audit firms as an auditor. From there, I moved into mostly controller level roles with companies ranging in size anywhere from 16 million all the way up to $16 billion. I've worked with, as controller, worked with many of the audit firms, Deloitte & Touche, Ernst & Young, second-tier accounting firms, Grant Thornton, Baker Tilly, Plant Moran. I've been instrumental in implementing some of the major accounting guidance that's come out as of late, including revenue recognition ASC 606, capitalization of leases ASC 842. And earlier in my career, was very involved with Sarbanes-Oxley with testing and documenting internal controls. So I think that background hopefully will be a good mix to complement, and work closely with Jim and Alderman Arnett and everybody on the committee to provide some more support, basically. So that's in a nutshell. I am an active CPA and an MBA as well. So to add that in there as well.
All right. I see Kim has her hand up and Madeline has her hand up. Kim, did you want to? Or is it just on my screen that I see?
Hi.
This is,
yeah.
no, this is Kim, and and Madeline might want to say the same thing. Jody has joined the meeting by phone. So she's
okay.
Jody,
Yay.
the finance director, is attending by telephone. Just want to make sure you know that. Also, if you can, a little sidebar here. I know, Alderman Arnett, you've been nominated as the chair, but could you actually take a vote? I think I have to record the vote.
All
Okay.
right. I thought we had,
Just
but yes,
for your
all in
consideration.
favor.
Thank you.
I was trying to avoid the negative vote here. All in favor of nominating me as chair signify by saying aye.
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 I believe the ayes have it. All right. And I'm trying to find, I won't be able to do it. I will send Anthony's CV to everybody. I should have done that, and it was an oversight, but I will get that to all the committee members. Next item is performance measures, and Vicky, can we do something very, very brief, because we're trying to get out of here so we can get down to the budget committee hearings. By the way, Anthony, Victoria Buckland is the assistant city manager, and she is working on the city's strategic plan and performance measures. And pardon?
I'm just going to share my screen real quickly.
Yeah.
Hopefully, why is that? That's not what's supposed to be.
Yeah, I was going to say that's
That's
interesting.
not.
Holes.
That's not what. That's not what it says that I'm sharing. Okay, let's try this again.
This
Wow.
is great. This is great.
Yeah, I know, right? Wow, I have no idea why it's doing that. Okay. All right. I'm not going to waste our time. In the proposed annual operating budget, the performance measures for the departments are scattered with each of the departments. They're listed with each of their departments. Most of them are the same as last year. They're formatted a little bit differently to conform more with the GFOA standard around how performance measures should look within a budget presentation. But for most of the departments, the information is the same. You'll see some blanks in there because just trying to get some of the older information in particular. We'll continue to fill those in as some of that stuff trickles in. There are a couple of departments that are new, however, and that was what I was going to point out. So within the Department of Public Works, for example, the biggest change that you're going to see there, a lot of the measures themselves are actually the same, but the thing that was missing was, what is the practical upshot of this? What are we actually proposing to do? So the biggest change you're going to see is actually within the benchmarks, which talks about what's the life cycle. If we do this much, how long is it going to take to refresh the stock of the city's assets? So for example, linear feet of sewer mains inspected as a % of all sewer mains under asset management, right? They're proposing 10 miles basically, right? And given that we have 660,000 linear feet, that means we would get to all of them on a 12.5-year cycle, right? So you see that for a bunch of the different assets in public works. And so the part of what that helps hopefully contextualize for folks is that life cycle that they're funded at, does that seem, is that where the city wants to be? And that kind of information, I think, is the sort of stuff that you guys had been interested in. It's part of the questions I heard when I first arrived. Hopefully for Public Works, at least, that provides some context for what does this mean, and opens up some avenues for conversation for you guys in terms of decision making. Now,
can I interrupt? Vicky, just,
Yeah.
so I was reading Fire and Parks and Recs last night for their presentations this morning.
Yeah.
And it's very heavy on output and very light on outcomes. And I think what you're talking about is an outcome. Are we achieving a long-term cycle of repairing, keeping our roads and streets in repair? And so I think we have a
Yeah.
ways to go, but I really do appreciate
So,
this focus on outcomes rather than output.
yeah, so in page 67, if you're looking at the PDF of the proposed operating budget, page 67 is the performance measures for finance, who is another one. They're all new, so that you're not going to actually see any data there because, of course, finance has been very busy just getting this together at all. But what you do see there are the proposed measures. And this one, hopefully, again, is a little bit more outcome focused.
So again, Vicky, let me, I don't have my budget book in front of me, but
That's why I was trying to share my screen.
I don't know that Jim and Anthony or Anne Marie, do
Okay.
they have access to that even? And if, I think since it's the audit committee, we ought to talk to Kim or somebody to make that available to them, and Jim doubly so because he's also on the Financial Advisory Commission.
So if you go to the city's website on the homepage under government, you'll see city budget. So if you click on that, the proposed capital and operating budgets are actually posted online as the PDFs, so that, which is what I'm looking at. So you actually can go right there, and it's publicly available.
So I just got into the city's website.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's along the top, government is the first of the headings along the top. And
right.
The first thing under that is city budget.
Oh, gotcha. All right.
Yep. And within that list, then the capital budget is first, and then below that are the series of operating budgets. And the 25 proposed is in both of those places.
So wait a minute, you've lost me. I see proposed capital improvements. I don't see.
Yep. And so scroll down a little bit. You'll see the operating budgets.
Oh, yes. Okay. All right. Okay. And so then where were you? You were in finance?
So I was on page 67, which is finance, and that's where the performance measures are for the Department of Finance.
All right. You're going too fast. So I go to the proposed 25 budget.
Correct.
All right. I'm clicking again in my usual impatience. All right. Here it comes. All right. And then go to page 67. I don't know if everybody else.
The number of the page is 63, but it's page 67 of the PDF. So the number printed at the bottom of the page is 63. But if you're just choosing a page number in the PDF, it's page 67. If that makes sense.
63 performance measures, and I assume we're in finance. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
So what you don't see is any data, but what you do see there then is what's proposed as here are things that we care about for the Department of Finance. So things like, are we processing payments on time, and are we processing them accurately? Because rework, both late payments represents sort of a different kind of risk for the city. Rework obviously is an expensive proposition. In terms of increasing efficiency of city spending, one of the things that you guys care a lot about is the variance between our budgeted expenditures and revenues versus actuals. That's part of what we need and want from the Department of Finance is really good forecasting. How much of our debt is spent within 12 months, percent of the grant funds that we had projected, or grants, by the time they get to the end, how much of the grants got spent. So really making the most out of external funding sources that we have. so, and it, goes on there. And so hopefully that also sort of much more in the realm of what's the end product that we're really trying to get to, right? We're trying to get to people having current accounts on their billing and, stuff like that.
So this is this is excellent, but what does the council do for 2025 if, as the percent of grants spent is 45, not 90?
So then the question, my general line when it comes to measures is that the fact of the number is not as interesting as the story of the number. And so a lot of times for something like that, your first question is, well, why is that? Like, I wouldn't have expected that. So there's a story that's there that we need to find out. And within that story then are the seeds of how do we change that picture. But depending on why it is the way it is, there are potentially a lot of different things that you might end up doing. So there's a lot of the performance measures that I view somewhat as canaries in the coal mine of when do I need to go looking for a story because something's not what I expected, not what I wanted, something like that.
So in the dialogue before the finance committee, the question would be, gee, 45, not 90, what's going on? And that would give the finance director the ability to say, well, I have one of my staff out on sick leave and I have a vacancy. And so I really need some budget help. So the department heads can view this as something that starts a dialogue rather than something you get penalized by.
Yes, exactly. And I generally speaking, I don't have fears about the people who work for the city trying to do the right thing and wanting to do the right thing. The question ends up being, so that question of doing something just to penalize people or asking questions just to penalize them sort of assumes that people are sort of acting in bad faith anyway in some ways. And that's not really not been my experience here in the city.
I agree. So, yes.
Yeah. So I think you're absolutely correct that it's an opportunity for dialogue. And there's a tons of things that happen in the city. So part of the question ends up being, how do you focus in on the things that are really going to move the needle, that are going to really matter? And that's also where the performance measures help, is where should I be looking for a story? I don't have to look for a story for everything. There's maybe some particular places where we need to have a conversation about what's the story. So at any rate, they're there. Even the ones that are the same as last year, they look different because the presentation is different. But there are a few of them then that are more different. Police ended up being a little bit in the middle. Rec ended up being a little bit more in the middle. Some of it's older. So we didn't quite get maybe as far as we would have liked, but we pulled in that direction a little bit. So at any rate,
this is for Jim and Anne Marie and Anthony. We had a budget briefing last week, and this was a part of the topic of discussion. As you can tell from what Vicki is saying, this is a work in progress, but this is part of the purview of the audit committee. And we're going to be in the thick of the budget, so we're going to be testing out this new format more or less real time. But then I would think that, Vicki, when you think we're ready, we may need to have a separate audit committee meeting to sort of review all of this. And
I actually did want to ask about that, because one of the things that came up in the council session was some of the code language around performance measures. And I'm sorry, Alderwoman Pindle Charles, I see you have your hand up. Okay.
You're on mute. You're muted anyway.
Yeah, just keep going, Ms. Buckler.
Okay. And so the way that code language looks to me it looks like there is supposed to be sort of an annual review of how did things go this last year, and what are the measures that we think are going to help us with decision making when we get to next year. And it looks to me like that code language puts that time frame that council has to sort of adopt that 1st of March. There's a January 15th date when information is supposed to be in by, but I did want to follow up with that because I want to make sure that we're in line with that and sort of doing that the right way. And so I think Alderman Arnett, I think you're correct. I think that would be a good idea for this next year, right. To go over some of that and make sure that we're both complying with the code, the letter and the spirit.
Right. And I want to say personally, before I recognize Alderwoman Pendle-Charles, that I am grateful that we're making this kind of progress. As you know, this is something that I have long been pushing and desirous of. And I think it's nothing but a good thing that we create a system that generates this dialogue. As you also know, I think that the performance measures need to feed into the city's strategic plan going up and into performance appraisals going down to the staff level. So I think this is a very important step. Alderwoman Pendle-Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Buckland, you indicated that Rec and Parks and police fall somewhere in the middle. Is that going to be somewhat of a discussion today? Because those are the two that are being presented today before the Finance Committee. If not, fine. I was just
fire today, not police.
Oh, is it right? Fire today. Fire.
Probably. Obviously, council is able to ask whatever it wants, but my guess is probably not.
Okay.
Unless that's something that obviously part of the presentation is talking about performance measures, but how deep they go into that, I think really ends up being a question of whether that's the thing that Finance Committee wants to talk about, council wants to talk about, or whether their questions along the way are in other areas. So I think in a lot of ways, the departments will present it. How deep you end up going in the discussion, I think, is a question of where council wants to spend their discussion time.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Buckland. All right. Thank you. Police, I think, maybe Thursday, but yeah, today is fire, Rec and Parks. Okay. Thank you so much.
Tim's hand was up, but now I don't see it. Anthony.
Yes. Thank you, Alderman Arnett. Ms. Buckland, the measures, particularly like for finance and so forth, are these already adopted and approved or pretty much approved, or has there been any vetting of these or kind of where is it in the process of finalization, I guess I would say?
Yeah, so that's a good question. That's actually what I was referring to earlier. And this I'm sure is something that probably got mentioned to me and blew past me. There actually is code language around adoption that I actually did not go through this last year. And so this is the first time council's really seeing this. So in some sense, it'll get adopted with the budget, but that's what I would like to make sure that I do differently this next year to kind of comply with that timeline that's spelled out in code.
So these measures, are they pretty much locked down at this point? Is that what I'm hearing?
So unless they get deliberately changed by council during the budget process, then that's what they'll be for 25. Generally speaking, my attitude is progress, not perfection, and that the performance measures should be living things. Some of them, you may get into them and be like, that seemed like a good idea at the time, but it turns out that didn't actually tell us what I was hoping it would tell us. Well, you should ditch it at that point and replace it with something else. And so in some sense, the characterization of them being written in stone for 25, unless they're deliberately changed by council for that year, yes. But after that, it's always a question of, did that actually help us understand the situation, have a certain kind of dialogue? And if it didn't do that, didn't help our understanding, didn't help us have a certain kind of dialogue, then what do we do it? Right? Let's change that to something that will help us.
Great, thank you.
All right, this was very good. Are there any other comments before we move on to the next item on the agenda? Thank you, Vicky, for that, and look forward to, as we get into it during the budget process, which we will this morning, and I already have some questions for fire. Alderwoman Pendle Charles.
Yeah, I somewhat asked that question of Alderwoman Tierney, since she's chair of the Finance Committee. I said whether she's going to be looking for it or not. But anyway, all right, thank you. That's it. Just a comment.
Okay. I do not believe we have any active issues for risk assessment, fraud, and abuse. There's certainly nothing that I've received as a report on the hotline. So if there is nothing from the committee, let's move on. And I would suggest Director Dickinson, particularly since you're on the phone, probably on the way to where we're all going to be leaving. I see Ellie and Rhonda and I are all at home, so we've got to get down to City Hall for the Finance Committee meeting. Are there any quick highlights, Jody, that you want to offer via phone? Good report. I like a short, succinct report like that. I think with that, we have completed the business of the agenda. Is there anything for the good of the order from the committee? And Anthony, these meetings usually go a little bit longer than this. We try to end at 9, but sometimes when I talk too much, we don't meet that objective. Committee members, I will send you this afternoon Anthony's CV for your review. I hope you're as impressed as I am, and we can move quickly to getting him onto the Audit Committee, at least in my opinion, move quickly. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.